So now that we know all the basic vocabulary of parabolas, how do we actually use all of this to find the attributes of a parabola in order to describe it? Well, one of the first things that we want to do is to find the vertex. The vertex is always going to come from the h and the k. H, we're always going to get when we look right next to the x. So h, this number will always be the opposite of what we have here. So if it says x plus 3, that means that h right here will be a negative 3. So in either of these examples, whether we're dealing with a horizontal or a vertical parabola, always look where the x is to find the h. The k is going to come from the part right next to the y. So regardless of how we write it, look next to the y and we're going to find the k. So hk will be our vertex. Then we're going to find 4p. 4p is always going to be the number that's right next to the part that isn't squared. So as an example, if we wrote down this equation of a parabola, the 4p, we'd have to look for the part that isn't squared. So not this side, this side. So this side isn't squared, and then 4p is going to be the number in front. So 4p right here is 12. 4p is also called the focal width. So if we wanted to find the focal width of this parabola, the focal width is 12. And if we solve this equation by dividing both sides by 4, we get that p is equal to 3. We might need to use this, or we will use this later. The next thing that we need to do is to determine if it's a vertical or horizontal. And all we're looking for is what part of it is squared. If the part with the x is squared, then it's vertical. If the part with the y is squared, then it's horizontal. And if it's vertical, that means that when we're finding the focus, we're going to add on to the y part of it, so k plus p. If it's horizontal, that means the x part of it is going to change. So we're going to add on to the h here, h plus p. So depending on if it's vertical or if it's horizontal, we're going to add on to a different part. Remember, this number p is the same p that we got here. So that's why we found the p. We're going to either add it on to the k or add it on to the h, depending on whether we have a vertical or horizontal parabola, and that will give us the focus. So if we wanted to find the directrix, we're going to do the same thing. First of all, figure out if we have a vertical or figure out if we have a horizontal parabola, and then just use these two equations. Whatever k is, subtract p from it. Whatever h is, subtract p from it, and that will give us our directrix. So suppose that we had this example here and we need to find out its attributes. First, let's find the vertex. So remember, for the x part of the vertex, we're going to look right on the x part of our equation. So we have this plus 4 here. So we're going to put the opposite in here, negative 4. Now let's find the y part of it. So we're going to look at the y part. So positive 1 here, that means we're going to put negative 1 here. So that's our vertex. So let's find our 4p. Let's find our focal width next. So we're going to look at the part of the equation that is not squared. So this side is squared. This side is not squared. So we're looking over here on the right side for the part that is unsquared. And we're going to look at the number in front. So 16 is the number in front. So our focal width is 16. We want to solve this by dividing both sides by 4. So we end up with that p is 4. So now let's use that. To get the focus, remember we have two different scenarios. One if it's a vertical, or the other if it's a horizontal parabola. In this case, we have a horizontal parabola. Horizontal, add to h. So h plus p we said was what we had to do. Our h was -4. So for our focus, we're going to do -4 plus, we just said p was 4, so plus 4, and our k is -1. So we're going to put -1. If we add this, we end up with 0, -1 for our focus. Now, finally, let's do the directrix. For the directrix, again, we have a horizontal parabola. So that means that we're going to go with the equation x equals h minus p. So h, we know previously was -4, p is 4, so -4 minus 4. So our directrix equation is going to be x equals -8. So here's one that you can try on your own. So pause the video, try this one, see how it works out for you. So if we have x minus 6 squared equals -12 times y minus 9, see if you can figure this one out. Okay, so the vertex, we know we're going to get from looking at the x and the y parts. So the x part here gives us a 6. So we're going to put a +6 here. The y part gives us a 9. So we're going to put a +9 here. Now let's do the focal width, which we said was 4p. So we look at the part that is not squared. So that's this side is not squared. And we're going to use -12 for our focal width. So we're going to take that equation and solve it by dividing by 4. So p equals -3. For our focus, we have to remember, do we have a horizontal or do we have a vertical parabola? In this case, because the x is squared, we know we're going to have a vertical parabola. And for vertical parabolas, we know that we're adding on to the y part of it. So h is the same, and we're adding on to the y part. So our focus is going to be, well, our h part was 6, our k part was 9. We're going to add on p, so p is -3. So now let's write down what we have. So 9 plus -3 is 6. So 6 comma 6. This is our focus. Our directrix, since we have a vertical equation, is going to be a y equals equation. And in fact, it's going to be y equals k minus p. So that means we're going to have y equals, k was 6, k was 9, and p is -3. So 9 minus -3. Minus a negative means the same thing as add. So 9 minus a -3 is going to give us 12. This is the equation for our directrix.